Welcome to channel. Today, we explore story filled with unexpected twists. Please, subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's begin. I was 9 years old when Uncle Martin stopped by. I was outside in the garage playing with Rocky, our new puppy, when I heard a couple loud bangs from inside the house. I watched Uncle Martin hurry into a vehicle and speed away. I raced inside to see what had happened, and when I saw them, I almost passed out. My mother was motionless with a bloody hole in her chest. My father was also gone, with a wound where his right eye used to be, and my brother, he, too, had died. The bullet had impacted his forehead, ripping off part of the top of his head. I heard shouting, but it was only later that I realized it was myself. Nobody came to see what was wrong, and no one came to investigate. I lay there all night, clutching my deceased brother on my lap, without moving or thinking. I believe that night I wept my last tears. The following morning, I put my family on their beds, covered them with covers, and washed myself off. I packed a little backpack that suited me well. Inside, I kept underpants, socks, a knife, fork, spoon, cup, and a plastic bowl. I wrapped up a gray blanket and fastened it to the bottom of my backpack. I learned that Dad did not trust banks. He had moreover $105,000 concealed in 2 shoe boxes labeled college funds for my brother and myself. I stole the money, the .30 caliber Smith hidden beneath his mattress, and the automobile. Uncle Franklin owned a farm in central Iowa. He taught me how to operate the tractor while we were picking rocks. Though I was large enough to drive it, I wasn't strong enough to move the harder boulders, so that was his responsibility. Later, Dad showed me how to drive the hay carts back to the barn once they were full. I handled the automobile well, as do most country youngsters. I scribbled on the wall, Uncle Martin did this. He was a gentle guy with a kind grin and curly hair that ladies admired. Aunt Clara definitely did, since he was accompanied by 2 youngsters named Luke and Ray. Then I left. I had to sit atop a stack of books taped together to see where I was going, and I used blocks to handle the gas and stop pedals. I went west, using back roads. I lived on oatmeal and canned peaches, filling the petrol tank whenever possible and purchasing a gallon of water. I utilized the station restrooms to get what I needed and clean up a bit. I slept in parking lots surrounded by other automobiles. I realized I should have packed another shirt and pair of trousers before leaving. I needed a change of clothes so I could do my washing. I spent a few bucks at a big lot shop in Belleville, Illinois, for a shirt, jeans, and boots. I got a thick jacket and a cap. I cleaned up in a laundromat restroom while my new clothing washed, and then I rinsed my dirty clothes. I discovered a newspaper on a table in the laundry. It was a few days old, but that was okay. Oh, there I was on the 3rd page with last year's school photo. All I could do was keep going the way I had. I was instantly pleased I had the baseball cap. The coat also made me seem larger. I recall Dad checking the water and oil before heading up to Uncle Franklin's. This journey had been much longer, so I felt I'd better check them. Yes, the automobile was down 2 quarts of oil, and the radiator could need half a gallon. The ancient Pontiac got me to Columbia, Missouri before it wore out. I removed the license plates before leaving it. I had an excellent night's sleep before packing up. I discovered a roadside bus station and purchased a ticket to Tucson. The persons waiting for the bus did not seem to be suitable traveling companions. I stopped at a hardware shop to get a sheath knife and some munchies. They had towels, strong tape, and plastic wrap. I put most of my money in plastic and a few of towels. The peanuts, fruit drink, and other ingredients were placed on top. I attached the large buck knife to the left side of my belt so it wouldn't dangle down. You have to give the buck guys credit. They do not sell dull knives. That bag never left my side, and as I fell asleep, I kept the backpack strap coiled around my arm. I awoke to a large person straining on the strap. He murmured softly, "Give it up, kid, and you won't get hurt." I wasn't going to give anything up. Damn it. I got out that enormous buck knife and stabbed it deep into his belly, all the way to the guard. He shouted a yell and moved to hit me. I stabbed him again, but higher. He wheezed and slumped down. That sapped all of his fighting spirit. I used one foot to push him over and into the corridor between the chairs. I was glad he crawled away. I used some napkins I had collected from a meal to thoroughly wipe the knife before stuffing them between the seat and the side of the bus. I fell back asleep after putting my knife away. At the next stop, an elderly woman boarded the bus. She sat down next to me. She gave me the look and then began crocheting something, swaying back and forth the whole time. After a time, she questioned, "You going to your folks? They got killed." She sneered at me, "You do it?" Why would I want to kill my mom, pop, and little brother? I raised my arms. I held her all night. She was cold, dead. There wasn't anything I could do, so I ran. I ran down. I didn't know what more to say. She touched my shoulder. You did what you had to. She gazed at me for a moment, without smiling or frowning. You can stay with me if you want. I got a place north of Reno. It's God's own a-hole called Kyoto, Arizona. I raised some food for market. You wouldn't have lived on a farm, would you? She had an optimistic face. I nodded quickly. My uncle has a dairy farm in Wisconsin. I help pick rocks, bale hay, drive a tractor, scoop cow. They'll do whatever for a place to stay. She grinned and leaned back. Good. If you can work with your hands, we'll do what together. It was just June 18th when we stepped off the bus, but it was stinking hot. The air slapped my face like a new towel from the dryer. Old Lois had inherited the butt end of a cow property from her parents. The ranch home was composed of stone and strong timbers, making it simple to heat and cool. Because she was an only child, only the government was interested in her inheritance. She possessed an ancient, dilapidated central pivot walking irrigator that made a large circle. It emitted water jets intermittently while the wheels moved in a circle 24 hours a day, propelled by water pressure. We've got one hell of a deep well here, she was saying. It was pounded in during the mid-30s, just after the Dust Bowl. The deep water levels were low. They had to go searching for it. The water's cold and sweet. I sat on tractors a lot. She had an ancient Ford with a four-bottom cultivator. It was tiny enough to fit beneath the walking wheel as I nibbled the weeds. Everything was planted with the same spacing between rows so that the tractor and equipment would not crush any of the crops. When I wasn't driving the tractor, I was taking care of it. Lois had one more person on the property. His name was Earl. He performed a lot of repairs and cooked. He smiled and smacked my back. He stated he was pleased I was there because it kept his buttocks off of the tractor seat. I got a wonderful room to myself, but I had to keep everything clean, including the bathroom. Lois said, I'm too old to be cleaning up after a young gun. You do what you know you should, and he'll take care of the rest. She agreed. She kept me fed and dressed, which made me wonder whether she was going to throw me out. But she kept me. I even received a lift to school. It wasn't much of a school, but it was nearby. I didn't have to take a 40-mile bus journey to and from Reno every day. I did not make any pals. They appeared to take one glance at my eyes and dismiss it as a lousy job. I went to school, listened in class, completed my assignments, and returned home. The field house was packed with migrant laborers, while the front yard was littered with pickup trucks, beat-up automobiles, and campsites. For approximately a month every autumn, when the crops arrived for harvest, enormous trucks came every day to cart away flats of vegetables until the fields were empty. Everyone left save Lois, Earl, and myself, as if the sun had blown away a fog. After that, I plowed beneath the majority of the garden, with the exception of the root vegetables that we would consume. If it hadn't been for my blonde crew cut, I'd have looked just like the migrants, save my gray eyes. When I became a bit larger, I received a .21 rifle for New Year's Day. Damn, I was proud of that thing. I tried my best to bring rabbits for supper. However, Earl refused to accept them until I skinned and cleaned them first. Then the nasty gophers came in. I built 3 little 8-foot towers right beyond the irrigator route. I was up in those things before dawn, before school, and throughout the summer. Lois gave me a weird look when I repeated asking for more .22s, but she eventually purchased them. Our gopher issues were resolved. When I was 16, Lois began paying me $120 each month. You've got to learn how to handle money, Ben. I did not spend any of it. I put it away with the others. I learned how. Lois planned the plantings so that all of the crops would arrive at different times. That manner, the migrants had a chance to pick everything before it spoiled in the field. They could only do so much in a day. I noticed a little deer in the early morning. I loaded my wallet with cash and requested Earl to drive me to town the next time he went shopping. What are you after, Ben? Rifle. Saw some deer. Okay. What kind of rifle? Marlin bolt action, .21 Magnum. That'll do her. We'll get you taken care of. Then go get the groceries. From the first shot, it seemed like the gun understood exactly what I was looking for. During dusk and daybreak, javelina and mule deer descended from the hills to visit the vegetable gardens and the wheat fields near town. It only took a few seasons for the back of the field house to be covered with tacked-up skins. They might be purchased elsewhere throughout the city. Sam and I went in approximately 4 times a year, with the trunk of his vehicle filled with dried skins. It provided me with clothing, boots, ammo, and school fees, as well as a little amount for savings. The next day, Lois inquired as to how much I received for skins. She was angry. She was angry. She forced me travel to another location to sell my furs. I was really delighted to. I made more than 4 times what I had previously earned. I was saving more than $5,000 every year for my hunts. We ate the javelina and deer corpses, while I skinned the cats and left them for the wild dogs. I tried my best to maintain the fence surrounding the property. We had around 1,000 acres. I didn't want to waste that terrible tractor, so I carried a military pack frame with a shelf to carry a spool of wire, gloves, a box of staples, and a set of stapling pliers. I walked the fence slowly at first, but I gradually improved. After a time, I got this shuffle going that was eating up the distance. It came to the point where I could chug over the fence in the morning. Earl drove the vehicle around it once to verify the distance using the odometer. It got to about 26 miles. I just continued taking him up and putting him down till the work was completed. After graduating from high school, I received my diploma and driver's license. Lois sat me down after dinner one day. "So, you're going to go find your uncle and settle his hash?" I asked her to wait. I went in my room to get an envelope I had been putting together. There was a newspaper headline captioned "Martin Montgomery arrested for murder." He had been dating my wife, and the victim, Derek Hughes, had been living with his long-term boyfriend, Calvin Moore, for nearly 9 years. Mr. Evans reported the crime, and state police have started many cold cases involving Mr. Montgomery. She put down the article. "So you got it out of your system?" I shook my head, gazing out the window at the desolate terrain. "Afraid not. I've got too much unforgiveness built up inside. Wrong time, wrong place, and it'll be a storm. It's safer here. Safer for me. Safer for others. How about Earl and me?" "Ah, hell, Lois, I'm your dog, and you know it. I'd hold still for it if you felt you had to put me down." She lowered her head and rested her arms on the kitchen table. "Dear Lord, guide me in the tasks you set before me." She looked at me as if she were searching for gold flakes through quartz. "You've been taking critter hides right and left. With a few college courses under your belt, we might get you a good-paying job as a state game warden. You know, tracking." I shake my head. "I know a couple of Pueblo guys who'll teach me tracking for a good supply of mule deer for the local tribe. Do it with that under your belt, and some good desert training by the tribes, you'll be a shoo-in. Come Monday, let's see what you'll need for classes to qualify. Ranger Station should know." That's how I got started. I discovered a handful of college scholarships for orphans and low-income farmers. I had to transfer to the UNR campus as a freshman. I benefited much from all of my academic reading. I performed well on tests and even passed a Spanish college course. I worked closely with the migrants and even read the local Spanish newspaper. I discovered a second-hand truck at a rancher auction. It looked like hell, but as I opened the hood, I grinned because someone had taken care of it. I placed my bid and purchased a 92 crew cab long bed half-ton for $900. It looked like 5 miles of rough road, but it ran and rode well. I spoke with the campus maintenance supervisor, explaining that I was accustomed to working for a job and would enjoy finding a lovely, cool basement room someplace in exchange for anything he wanted done. He stroked his head for a time before sitting back down. "You look likely enough. Where do you work up by Mopa? An irrigated truck garden?" He waved his hand. "You been working for Dirty Lois?" I started to grow angry. "Don't call Lois that around me, or we'll have a fight." I almost went over his desk to fix his necktie. "Now hold on there, fella." He backed away as quickly as he could. I didn't mean nothing by it. I glared him down and replied, "Well, I did. We better not have anything more to say, lest I pound you in like a fence post, mister." I walked out. I located a furniture company that I might convince to hire me as a living night watchman. He had a line on a little travel trailer that he towed into this massive receiving area. He connected the sewage, water, and electricity, then ensured that air circulated outdoors via a large louvered fan. I received a copy of the keys and $150 every week. He hired a night watchman, and I saved $1,000 a month on his insurance. We made out like bandits. When I found accommodations outside of their dorms, the university flipped out. But I made an appointment to meet with the dean of students and dressed in my best suit. When I told him my narrative of misery, I was surprised to see him sit back and grin. "Son, you hooked up with Lois Place?" "Yes, sir. Up by Mopa with Earl. She took me in as an orphan when I was 9. She wants me to take the courses I need to be a game warden. I'm thinking maybe state police, even." I went on. I have to keep away from the campus maintenance supervisor, or there's going to be blood spilled. Ain't nobody calling her dirty Lois in my hearing and getting away undamaged. He grinned and responded, hell, I got plenty of desert, a diamond point shovel, and I know how to use it. Now take it easy, son. I don't have anything but respect for Lois. Well, that's what I want to hear, but y'all keep Simon's crew yaps shut, or there's going to be a few mysterious disappearances in your maintenance staff. I told you. I shook his hand and departed. Oh Christ, Lois done raised a Marine. That night, the telephone lines saw much more traffic than usual. I didn't feel right without getting some excellent workout every morning. Most days, I got up early, grabbed up a pack of gallon water bottles, and ran around the campus track until I ran out of energy. It was far more dull than following the fence line, but it was about 50 miles closer. Just as in high school, I went to class, completed my homework, took my examinations, and went home. Friends? I had no pals. I felt adrift since I had no responsibilities to perform after school. The shop manager spotted me after school seeking for anything to do. He led me inside the office and showed me the warehouse's scheduling system. Say, you want to load and unload these trucks according to the clipboards on this tree? They'll pay you for it. How much? I asked. He began to act strangely, and I noticed. You know I've been nothing but straightforward with you. He sneered and screwed up his face. All right. Damn it. I pay two guys $8 an hour each for an hour to load or unload a truck. That's $16 a truck. They'll pay you in cash. Somebody's got to teach me to back up and navigate these big semis, or I'm an accident waiting to happen. Good man, I said. Better you bring it up now than after an insurance hit. Come Saturday, they'll come in and show you all you need to know. I grew up doing everything here. We shook hands and smiled. That Saturday, I learned how to hook up, back up, and park a semi-trailer, how to use a forklift, and how to read a warehouse docket. I emptied and reloaded 4 to 7 trailers each night before going to bed. That was some excellent money. I utilized the college computers to see what employment were available for persons with my qualifications. Surprisingly, game wardens were more difficult to apprehend than state police. I altered the emphasis of my classes to criminal justice and undertook ride-alongs with the local police, despite the fact that it reduced my salary. One day, I took some evening EMT night classes. I performed some speed training on the running track and practiced my military PT. In the summer between my first and second years, I learned how to track. I informed them that I was joining the state police and would need to be able to trace individuals. That really changed what they taught me. Nobody ever caught me asleep again. They taught me to focus on nothing and see everything. That was really difficult. I could not do it till they gave me some peyote. It eventually became a habit. Whenever I entered into a room, I saw everything. They told me to start painting and sketching to record what I saw. The winter before graduation, I purchased a Sig Sauer 19 9mm semi-automatic handgun. I spent a lot of bench time focusing on target detection and accuracy, regardless of whether I was standing, squatting, twisting, or laying prone on my back. I was determined to hit my target, even if it meant being thrown into a corner and having my leg shattered. I graduated from college with great grades. I interviewed to join the state troopers. I finished school at the age of 20. By 21, I realized how politicized the job was. I despised it. Instead, I applied for an interview with the federal marshals to become a deputy. I passed the competition ladder and proceeded to Georgia to attend their institution. They had VHS classes on how to do everything, from taking a shower to tying your shoes. Watch a movie, then take an exam. Wash, rinse, and repeat. Some movies I watched twice or 3 times because I knew I'd missed something. I continued doing that till I ran out of movies. They then teamed me on assignments. My trainer was frightened by my quiet. What, don't you want to ask anything? No. I figure that if you want me to know something, you'll tell me. If you screw up and don't tell me, it'll be your fault, not mine. Then I'll hunt you down. He gazed at me the way a rabbit looks at an owl. I had a different trainer. He explained everything to me, including what he knew about each job, what to anticipate, what each bad man was like, and what he had done in the past. I received an increasing number of armed and risky retrievals. My success rate was rather high. When the runners spotted me over the barrel of my rifle, they lost all their fighting spirit. I asked one of the more dangerous ones why he had given up. He went on, "You're a stone-cold killer. I could see it in your eyes." I didn't have a chance. I spent more than 10 years in the field, returning runners, some to Canada, others to Mexico, and some to the remote woods of Montana or Maine. I didn't care. Most of the time, I returned them alive. I've always lived frugally. The service compensated me for all of my time spent running around on the job. I had a uniform allowance and a PDM budget while on the road. I just had to pay for apartment rent, energy, insurance, and food. I saved the money. The psychologists no longer wanted me on the field. The service had to listen to them. They released me with a medical. I was left with no direction. No military or police would employ me with my mental profile. I purchased a Chevrolet Impala with the police package from the service website. The model was remaindered since it could not accommodate 5 people. It had minimal mileage, so the garage checked it out for me. I signed my separation papers and returned to Arizona. It wasn't quite legal, but I turned in my old ID and retained my current one. Lois had died while I was away. I pulled up the driveway to see a picture of desolation. The ranch was closed, the irrigation pump had been switched off, the fields were dry, and the desert had begun to reclaim the land. I went to the county courthouse to find out what had transpired there. Lois had willed it to me without saying anything. I think she cared for me in the same way that I had cared for her. I discovered a note in the file stating that her lawyer had the property's deed, the keys, access to an account with some money, and a letter to me. I arranged an appointment to pay him a visit. Lois' account had been paying off the property tax for the last 3 years, so the house was debt-free when she died. The lawyer hired a cleaning service to go through the house and empty the refrigerator. Then he threw the breakers and closed the building up. I switched back on the power and the phone. I purchased a new vacuum and other cleaning products. I unlocked and flung open the gate, then drove through. The sun was hot, and the wind never stopped blowing, parching your lips in minutes and bringing a continual stinging grit everywhere. I strolled inside the ranch home after unlocking it. Familiar sights and scents crashed down around me. This was where I felt most at home. I left my luggage at the door and closed it behind me. In the near darkness, I opened the shades and drew up the curtains as I strolled through the house, going for the back porch, where the electrical service panel was located. I put in the main after opening all of the breaker boxes. The service panel light switched on, indicating that the electricity provider had completed their work. I began turning on breakers one by one, bypassing the irrigation pump and machine shed circuits. I'd have to see how things were before I attempted them. I heard the compressors turn on in the kitchen and the larger one outdoors in the air conditioner. The building had central air. I disconnected the air conditioning circuit and walked outside with a broom and a screwdriver. I wanted to clear the filters before I started it up. It took just 20 minutes to remove the debris and mouse nests before cooler air began to flow from the vents. I switched on the water pump. I heard coughing and spitting coming from the sink and restrooms. The toilets were filling up. When the traps were full, I shut off the sinks and put some water through the showers to fill them as well. I took out a 5-year-old container of instant coffee and set a pot of water on the stove to heat. Nothing. No gas. I tried the phone and received a dial tone. The propane company's phone number was listed on the front of the phone book. I called to check whether they were still in business. Yes, they were. I purchased 500 gallons to fill the tank. That meant no hot water, either. Damn it, I would be okay till tomorrow. I'd travel 40 miles into Vegas for supper and a place to stay the night. I'd also have a Merry Maids party to let them clean the darn house. It would be cold enough indoors by the morning, so I scheduled a 9 a.m. appointment. I went to town and purchased laundry detergent, a cheap mobile phone that could be linked to the home number, and a cheap and clean days in hotel. Then, with my federal ID, I purchased 2 new rifles, a nice handgun, a bolt-action geese gun, and a pump-action shotgun. I purchased a handgun holster, a large supply of ammo, and numerous cleaning kits with Hops No. 9 and dry lubricant. When it came to choosing my new guns, I went with a new Marlin. 21 Magnum bolt-action with iron sights and a Winchester A-bolt and 7mm Remington Magnum with a Redfield 3-12 power low-light scope. I had used one in the Army and been acquainted with it. For a handgun, I went back to my Sig Sauer 21. I also purchased a poncho to cover anything in the rear seat that didn't fit in the trunk. I had a wonderful meal and then brought the Sig Sauer into my hotel room with me, along with some rags and a cleaning kit to give it a thorough working over. Then I focused on the shoulder holster. When I was satisfied, I put it away and went to bed. I left for breakfast early, dressed in a casual suit to conceal my shoulder rig. I had forgotten what Reno was like in the morning. 6 a.m. It was no different from 6 p.m. Before returning to the ranch, I went by the Washoe County Sheriff's Office to check if they were taking applicants. I knew it was a risky notion given my psychological profile, but I had never shot an unarmed guy. ID never fired first unless a civilian was in danger, and ID been in the field for over 12 years, capturing jail escapees and federal runners. I took up an application. The commander had the local union caught in his craw and was going to perform some union busting. He was hurriedly thrashing the bushes to replenish his men while still giving services to the public. At first, it seemed like I was a shoo-in. By 2 p.m. that day, I had gas for my kitchen and water heater. Merry maids had swept through the home like a white whirlwind, and my washing machine was working overtime to clean the beds and drapes. The rugs were folded up and ready to be sent to the cleaners. I spent the most of the day in the machine shed, with a large fan blowing air around and swirling dust about like whirling devils. There was an air compressor in there, connected to 220 volts, to power a rack full of equipment and a good manual hydraulic ram kit, very similar to the Jaws of Life kit that I rehearsed with. That inspired me to write to the federal agencies and get a copy of my credentials, scores, and completion dates. Hopefully, I'd get credit via the Arizona training facility. The tractor had died. It seemed that they were starting it using a gasoline donkey engine mounted on the front of the driving shaft. That was hazardous as heck. I needed a new tractor. The tools need refurbishing but were otherwise in good condition. However, the planter was no longer functional. There was no local newspaper that wasn't all glitter and bling around Reno, nothing for the farmers. I had to go to the AG Co-op elevator to check if there were any ads for old equipment or auctions on the board. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, listening to a Vegas radio station. I requested a copy of my records and then got out my bank books to check my amount. I carried half a duffel bag full of cash that had been dumped during a narcotics investigation. I discovered it during the last area sweep when other teams had passed it by, so I figured it was fate that it fell in my lap. It was time to count it. I began arranging heaps of bundles in $100, $50, $20, and $10 increments. A little writing on my notebook yielded a number of $553,000, quite a little nest egg. From then on, I had to pay in cash for whatever I could. Things like gasoline and bills have to come from responsible money. I'd taken training on tracing counterfeiters and narcotic money, and I knew not to leave clues. Some gas tanks, shopping trips, and other purchases required clean money. Everyone had those expenses and had to turn up. Finally, I came to the note Lois had left me. Dear Ben, I'd like to be a fly on the wall when you got the news about the ranch going to you. I hope you enjoy living on the place and don't sell it off. There's a box full of warranty papers and whatnot in my bedroom closet. Pay attention to the irrigator contract. It's got a long way to go yet. Be careful cleaning out my bedroom when you go through it. I've been a pack rat for a long, long time. I love you, child. Lois Rudd Lawrence. I wasn't sure whether to weep or grin, so I did both. Old Lois treated me well to the end. I received a call the following day from the sheriff's office. I was asked to go to the headquarters at 8 a.m. I arrived bright and early, prepared for anything. They ran his background check and returned a list of my certificates. The state governor had approved the cross-posting. A box of captain's bars was on the desk in front of me, along with a cased batch. I glanced up to see the Washoe County Sheriff's cheerful face. Where do I sign? My new employer extended his hand for a shake. We've got to get you straight on the uniform and your duties. We're breaking this department away from the union until they can get it through their skulls that we determine if an officer gets put on paid leave, unpaid leave, or fired at our discretion, not that of the goddamn union. I was voted into this office, not the goddamned union president or his flunkies. I went on. Arrest them for interference with an officer, obstructing justice, and interfering with a law enforcement case. When their lawyers come in to get them released, search every one of them for firearms. If they're carrying on the premises, then they're automatically guilty. Put them away. If a judge objects, have him censured by the State Judicial Conduct Board. If it goes any higher, call the FBI. Sheriff Barrett's expression became intense. From your lips to God's ears. He summoned his secretary to have me sign papers and get me on the payroll while he began making phone calls. When the door to his office closed, his secretary asked me what had occurred. The sheriff was too near to the situation to see the solution. I just opened his eyes a little, I told him. After a deluge of paperwork was cleared, I was shown to an office with a decrepit desk and a rolling chair. I took one glance and smelled the money tree. I contacted a secretary to ask a few inquiries. Who's in charge of the fishings? You know, internal assets? That'd be Larry Bishop in accounting. And where can I get a copy of the last few years' budget breakdowns? That's all on the computer. I can print copies if you want. I nodded. Please. Now, is Brother Jerry in the office? She leaned over to me and whispered quietly, Him? You'd think he was on the golf team. He's never here. I grinned. I love the smell of corruption in the morning. It smells like victory. I discovered an emergency fire evacuation notice, which directed me to my office, and then walked down to the front desk to perform some bullshitting. I presented my government ID and said, Special Investigator Sims, please take me to the accounting department. I was speaking with the CPA within 9 minutes. We obtained budgetary documents for internal allotments stretching back 8 years, as well as the recorded costs deducted from those allotments. When the accounts payable records were checked for records of those checks, nothing was discovered. There were no directories in evidence. The money has disappeared. Still, the requisitions were there, and they had been signed by good old brother Larry Bishop. I asked the accountant casually, What does this look like to you? A repeated pattern of grand theft, he said. I nodded. Yep, and malfeasance of office. Let's get the keys to Brother Jerry's office and see if he's a stupid thief. Well, he was not foolish. His workplace was neat. On the basis of the evidence and my new stance, I went before a sitting judge to get a search warrant for Brother Jerry's home as well as a writ freezing all of his assets. I brought 5 cops with me to the nicer part of town and executed the warrant. We worked in groups of 2, shooting everything in its place before moving on to capture each page of the ledgers we discovered. I requested that 4 additional police travel around to other banks to freeze Brother Jerry's accounts. The wandering golfer was then taken in and arrested. He was appropriately Mirandized and secured in the pokey. When a union representative and 2 attorneys arrived at my desk and attempted to bite my buttocks, saying things like, You just don't understand how things work around here, I had them search for weapons. Now, why would a union rep and his lawyers have holsters and pistols? I requested an explanation. They didn't keep them for long. That was a federal crime. I personally ensured that they were properly Mirandized and videotaped before being placed in solitary confinement with the evidence. The sheriff went to the state's attorney and convinced a judge to arrange a hearing the next week. Old Jerry spent the next 15 years in Lovelock without parole. The budget received around half of its money back, $3.2 million. It waited until New Year's Day to finally get new workplace furnishings. The garage received a new lift, 2 tow vehicles, and equipment. I was assigned to a good police vehicle as part of the contract. Next, I looked over my job records, including hours and grades, pay grades, assignment schedules, and obligatory training certifications. Out of 20,000 personnel, 1/3 were behind in training, and more than half had not qualified on the range in over a year. It may seem that I had created a lot of enemies, but I also wondered why another set of troops had not gotten a wage raise in over 2 years. Where was the union representation? Probably slacking off someplace rather than completing their work. Things break apart, and others like me come in to repair them. The sheriff paid me a visit during my 2nd week. I just brought up the payroll and staff record issues. It must have just landed on his desk. He sat on my ragged visitor's chair, winced as it bit him in the buttocks, and smiled again. You're a mean little stir, aren't you? I knew my smile was risky. It had assisted me throughout more than one questioning. Yep. They'll kick a turd with steel-toed boots just to see the fly. They'll be shaking out some deadwood on the staff with this records thing. So don't be alarmed at seeing some holes in your staff. If I were you, I'd be wearing a vest outside the building too. That recalled me. I needed a housekeeper. The work would need a significant amount of my time. I had the space and could afford it. I needed a chef and a cleaner. I've got the bitter end of a ranch up in Mopa. Even 2 people. There's an old rotary irrigation system that's under warranty. I could get it shortened a bit and grow enough just for me and a few others. Maybe buy a few head of steer to feed up and put in a chicken house. This job's going to chew me up if I try to do it all on my own. He nodded. Smart. You're only 30. You can get something long-term out of it too. I gently shook my head. You know what federal recovery work does to your head after 12 years on the road? It's like I've been in combat. I need to unwind a couple of years first. He exhaled. I wish we could get a hold of half those training films you got qualified with. You're the best prepared officer on the force. Still, you're going to need some downtime to get your house in order. Tell you what, take a week, maybe 2. Come back when you've got some staff and the flames die down around here. Thanks, Sheriff. I need a tractor and some tools. It's late for auction season, but some folks are getting out of the business before the end of the year. They'll head down to the AG co-op to see if I can kill two birds with one stone. I parked my police vehicle in the repair and headed to the old grain mill. The ammonia tanks were housed on a train track. Several items on the notice board piqued my curiosity. I noticed an advertisement for an agricultural Ford dealership. I asked him to come out to the ranch and pick up the tractor and equipment. He had a flatbed and a day tractor that could accomplish the job. I went outside to check what he had in the backyard. He had an ancient John Deere 730 that someone had spent considerable time and work on. The front wheels followed the same tracks as the rear wheels, and all four matched the wheel spans of the attachments. He asked $13,500 for it. I promised $1,000 cash and delivered. Now that he had the concept, I asked him to look at my plow and cultivator in preparation for repairing them. I priced a sickle bar mower and a second-hand seed drill. I ensured that the seeder had the appropriate discs for seeding a food garden. I then paid the guy. I returned to the AG co-op to speak with the people who were lingering around. I introduced myself and shook hands with a couple people. I eventually expressed my predicament. The men spoke for a time, bringing up names I had never heard of. Finally, one of the younger men said, "How about Luis? Is he still around? What about Ingrid?" Someone else inquired. "Yep, still need him to death too." Another of the men remarked, "Luis Mexican and Ingrid Swedish. They had a passel of kids on a New Mexico pecan farm, then moved down here to retire. Be damned if they didn't miss farming. They've been looking for a small hold for ages. Well, we'll give him a call. I've got to clean the place up some, but the ranch house is clean and air-conditioned. They'll take him out for a good meal at a casino. Then if it all works out, they'll invite him out to the place tomorrow. If it doesn't work out, no hurt, no foul." They nodded all around. "Good idea. Nobody gets bent out of shape. Nobody gets hurt." I purchased a little, inexpensive wheelbarrow that would fit in the trunk of my vehicle. After supper, I went to U-Haul and purchased a dozen tiny boxes before returning home. My note from Lois advised me to use caution while clearing up her bedroom. That indicated to me that she had something concealed in there. I attentively examined the whole room. I stripped the bed, took out the mattress, patted down the box spring, and checked the frame. Except for a sawed-off shotgun, there were no surprises on the bedside table. The dresser contained large envelopes loaded with stock certificates taped to the bottoms of the drawers. I continued going. When I began working on her wardrobe, I almost filled my drawers. Every shoe had a roll of $20 bills tucked up near the toe. There were 8 bags hanging up, each loaded with hundreds of straps. The hat boxes were likewise filled with hundreds of straps. Good God, I wiped my lips with my palm. What else was here? Lois was a clever old bird. What would someone miss if they were looting the establishment? I groaned and moved over to the jewelry box. It looked like costume material. I opened the package with a strong light and started scrutinizing the mounts. Sure enough, it was costume jewelry that wasn't signed. 2 works were labeled Tiffany Studios. "Lois, you are such a filthy girl. I wondered how you did it all. Were you a Cold War spy? Did you work at the brothel?" I didn't know and refused to inquire. I let it stay a mystery. I needed somewhere to house all of these things. Courts may force the opening of safety deposit boxes, but what about safes? Not very much. I requested that a high-security safe be built next to the fireplace and covered with a bookcase. It took 3 carpenters, 2 masons, and 4 stores to implant that object in reinforced concrete. Then I felt safe. As a deputy, I'd seen some bizarre security arrangements. One person had a double safe, a compact walk-in safe with a 4-inch thick nickel steel liner inside that was elevated on blocks, leaving a 2-inch free area all around. He placed 20 pounds of Semtex between the safe and the liner. If you didn't reach up and turn off the switch after 2 minutes, that contraption was set to blow up and blast the liner across the room like a cannon shell, shattering everything in its path. Brutal. I kept the cash and Lois jewels there. I still had a few meters of C4 and caps from my rehab days. I also stowed them aside. Luis and Ingrid were an aging, squabbling couple who had been through it all before. He was knowledgeable with irrigation, while she was familiar with housekeeping and bookkeeping. I discussed chicks and a couple of calves. Their eyes brightened up. I recruited them on the spot. I purchased Luis a new truck and had the irrigation contractor come out and remove a few pipe lengths from the spray line. We planted a late clover crop to condition the soil and increase its nitrogen levels. The background noise of the irrigator reminded me of my upbringing on the ranch. It was a very reassuring sound. It put me to sleep at night and recalled pleasant recollections when I awoke each day. It got me in the mood to run around the property line before bathing and dressed every day. I examined the fences, exactly as when I was younger, and looked for animal footprints. It had previously been my job, and it was now again. I returned to work certain that the ranch would be cared for and that supper would be waiting for me when I arrived home. My coworkers noticed that I seemed calmer. I finally got my uniforms from the tailor. I received credit for multiple decorations for tough recoveries and civilian defense actions. I drew a service handgun, cleaned it well, and then made friends with it in the pistol range. I had to order an A-bolt 7mm with a Redfield sight since there were none in the armory. Everyone else preferred their P5, which I considered spray-and-pray weapons. I brought along a few of big men to learn how to fire a Garand M1 and .30-06. As they improved, I bought a pair of .50 caliber rifles so that our team could knock down armored vehicles or helicopters. I knew I was capable of shooting a Stinger, but no one else on the squad was, save the sheriff. That was insufficient to warrant the price. You didn't just buy one Stinger. You purchased 4 for $38,000 apiece. That would have made a huge difference in the budget. Would have to conduct some significant narcotics raids to fund it. I also wanted us to have armored vehicles. A pair of APCs armed with .50 caliber machine guns would go a great way toward keeping the troops safe while also easing my soul. Doug had explosives and C4 credentials, which relieved me of some of my concerns. It decentralized some of our training and was a useful talent for a huge department to have if we needed to demolish a building or blow up a security door. A significant proportion of our field personnel completed high-speed driving training. We needed more money to improve our skills and maintain them. For example, one guy destroyed 4 tires worth $200 each during a high-speed chase or escape and evasion drill. I dressed casually and visited a couple nearby reserves. I agreed to accept up to 10 couples on my ranch if they gave up being hardened drug runners. I didn't care about marijuana or hash. I wanted the big males. We did not have as much traffic as Oklahoma, Arizona, or New Mexico, but we did have our fair share. An elderly native man turned state evidence for us. I took him lock, stock, and barrel to the ranch and set up a 10-man operation to apprehend our runners. It was a ceramic cargo from Chihuahua in Mexico. The large clay jugs each weighed more than 9 kilograms, and the consignment included around 240 of them. It was a start. It certainly dried up the local providers. We conducted surveillance operations on crack houses to ascertain the drug circulation patterns. We then busted the distributors. We added a few $1,000,000 to the operational budget in this manner. Narcotic labs were vest pocket businesses that were difficult to destroy. Only tenacity and bloody-mindedness could bring them down. Our finest operation came from a trooper's wife who constantly watched the cable TV program Ozark. We hired a couple of college scientists to identify meth precursor chemicals, how they were utilized in industry, and who may have them. We converted those warehouses into baited traps. Nobody entered or left without a darn good cause and 2 days' notice. Bingo. After a few of interceptions, the traffic returned to nickel and dime levels. Then we had to keep an eye out for meth being transported across state boundaries. We informed other sheriff's departments and law enforcement organizations about our efforts. Some had the not invented here illness, but the majority cooperated. The New Mexico ATF detained a chemical tanker with 1/4 of its cargo tanks containing meth feedstock. I suppose I was too effective. After 3 years of generating difficulty for individuals who believed that laws were for other people, my job became a political football, and the sheriff was forced to fire me. He had difficulty looking me in the eye as he requested my badge and firearm. However, I did not say anything. Lesson 1. Life isn't fair. When I tried to leave the building, 3 news teams obstructed me. How does it feel to be dismissed from a senior position in the county sheriff's office? One of them inquired. I looked the moron in the eye and said, I'm a private citizen now, so I don't have to play pretty anymore. While the others were filming, I grabbed the camera from the nearest cameraman, unscrewed the lens, spat into it, and screwed it back on. Then I gave it back to him. Get a shot of his face. I just totally disrespected his equipment because of what the news services, broadcast. That's what happened to me. Your disrespect for me and the job I've been doing got me fired. Screw off. That's what it feels like. I surged past them to get to my vehicle and drove away. I stopped at a hardware shop for some wire and no trespassing signs, phoned home to see if Luis or Ingrid needed anything from town, then made a quick trip to the grocery store to satisfy Ingrid's list. I drove back to the ranch. I ran for much of the morning. The following day, I headed out with a backpack full of signs, a spool of strong brass wire, pliers, and gloves. I posted the whole fence line every quarter mile, but Henry, our stool pigeon, chose to go to the other end of the state, where his cousin had a sheep ranch. I purchased him a second-hand pickup vehicle and offered him $1,000 for his efforts. Hell, he departed in greater condition than when he came. I continued with my morning routine and spent a significant amount of time working in the garden. Now that I had the time, I recruited a few of day workers to assist me. One pipe piece returned to the irrigator, almost doubling the area under irrigation. I sowed the new fields with straight clover and paid cash for a second-hand old-style cube hay baler that was small enough for our tractor to run. I needed a hay cart, too. I had a small hay barn built out of poles and galvanized steel, a long, low cow barn constructed of double-wall pole barn sections and topped with a double roof to protect the inside from becoming an oven. It cost less than I expected. I wired it for lighting and laid a concrete floor so we could scrape away the mud. I set up feeding and watering stations inside the barn. I also installed stock tanks at the property's corners. Before purchasing any animals, I engaged a firm to install a fence line across the land, isolating the stock operation from the home and garden. I buried a cow gate at the gate to ensure that no animals crossed, even if the gate was left open. A cow gate is constructed of 4 to 6 inch thick pipes put over the aperture. Cattle avoid crossing them because it hurts their hoofs. Luis and I decided where to place the chicken coop and then marked out the foundation. I utilized the tractor's front-end loader to shovel up the soil before calling in a mixer truck to build the concrete foundation. I didn't need reinforcing bars since the load would be light. We laid concrete block walls slowly and carefully, using chalk lines and a level. We placed the chicken yard right up to the edge of the irrigator route so that some of the overspray would keep the ground wet enough to support weeds. I also made sure to put up some sunshades for the poor suckers. After thinking about it, I purchased a couple of inexpensive kitten wading pools. I emptied and filled them once a week, at least one of us did. Dumping the water resulted in additional green areas. The hen's favorite activity of the week was moving those wading pools. The grubs and worms that had emerged under the bottoms were now exposed to the birds. A person from the UNAR AG Extension Office persuaded me to lay some seep lines for passive irrigation and plant strip fields of feed. It utilized less water and eliminated the need for me to chop feed for the cattle on a daily basis. I just turned it out on one of the 2 fields until one became ragged, then swapped them. I only ran 50 heads, but it paid me handsomely every time they went to the butcher. When the cattle were transported, I chopped and baled the fields in that manner. I also got some money by selling the baled clover to other ranchers. The fields had an opportunity to recover until spring, when I purchased vaccinated and dewormed calves. Aside than moving the herd on occasion, keeping salt blocks out, checking on the stock tanks, cleaning out the buildings, and keeping an eye on the fences, it was a very mindless business. Luis and Ingrid eventually concluded that life was too much for them. They had a large savings account and wanted to retire on the Oklahoma coast. After they left, I got down with paper and pencil to figure out where my time was going. I wasn't doing too poorly, except for the chickens. They were a black hole. I sold quite a few birds and ate several fresh chicken meals. I had half a dozen brooders for eggs. To keep the flock population under control, I did not retain any roosters. Every morning, 3 hours were dedicated to jogging and monitoring the barrier. I spent 3 hours every day on the cattle and 2 hours on the tractor tending to the garden. It had been a long day, and I was going to need some assistance come harvest time. As it happened, I had my daily fresh salad and a plenty of fresh veggies. The difficulty was that I didn't have any spare time to do clothes or clean the home. Damn it, I needed a housekeeper again. I created a few advertising on 3x5 cards and brought them to MOPA to post on the boards at the cafe and grocery store. It was a rather straightforward advertisement. I requested for a chef, maid, and gardener for a small ranch, live in at $45,000 per year, self-insured, and with my mobile phone number so I could be contacted when working. I hadn't had any clicks in a week, so I walked down to the cafe for lunch and asked about my ad. Why isn't anyone calling? Aren't there any farmers' widows in the area who need a job? I questioned the waitress. She gazed at me like I was insane. Mister, nobody in their right mind is going to trust that ad. It's promising too much money, so everyone figures it's a scam to get them into a brothel or something. I snorted. No, it's the real thing. I own Loy's old place up at the north end of town. I've got cattle, chickens, and a big garden that I'm going to need a lot of help with. I don't have enough hours in the day to tend to my chores and keep the place clean. If anyone asks, tell them to drive on up and see. I run the fence every morning, tend the cattle, cultivate the garden, and tend to the chickens all by myself. I cut back the chickens a lot because it's just me. She stood there with her hands on her hips and smiled at me. Well, ain't you just the real thing? He'll pass the word around. After eating my burger and fries, I headed to the market to get a few items. Back at the ranch, I set aside a few tasks to do inventory. I required crushed shell and food for the birds, 40 salt blocks, several bags of lime, and a case of grease cartridges. I got it ordered and went outside to check on the animals' food and water. I had the mud scraped up the following day. Hell, that took so long that I think he'll start doing it every other day to save time. The structure was seldom utilized except during thunderstorms. I'd have to consider about turning it off until inclement weather arrived. A few sunshades over desolate areas of the land would be just as effective, if not better. I had to transport dirt on occasion to fill in around the stock tanks. I placed another order for the plywood and screws required to install the sunscreens before forgetting. I'd barely completed my stroll around the fence and returned to the house when I heard automobile horns. I finished cleaning the dishes and walked outside to see who it was. I didn't recognize the two ladies who waved from their automobile. I waved back and stepped up. They stood up, smiling. Hi, I'm Sandra, and this hayrace Nora. We're here about the ad. Wow, two at once. I exclaimed. They resembled rural ladies, robust and with weathered features. They seemed to be about my age. Come on in. They'll start a pot of coffee, I told you. They followed me via the rear door, peering around. Bathroom's through there if you need it, I said, starting the percolator with a rather strong batch. I got out the milk, sugar, and cups while the coffee was brewing. When everything was finished, I served 3 mugs and encouraged them to sit. You sure surprised me when 2 of you showed up. How come? Safety in numbers, Sandra added. They both seemed a bit uneasy. Well, you see, Sandra went on. We've both been widows for a few years and moved in together to keep the costs down. We were wondering if you might want to hire the both of us. I wasn't losing money, but I also wasn't earning much money over time. It would be fine if I could sometimes arrange to sell eggs in town or corn-fattened meat to a high-end butcher. Purchasing the corn would offset part of the earnings from the beef sale, but I had heard that using 2 corn-fed finishers improved meat quality. I'd also have to research the top meat-producing breeds. No matter, I felt I could cover their salaries for at least a few years. I saw that I had been silent for so long that the ladies were becoming concerned. Relax, I said. I was just going over the numbers in my head. I'm willing to hire you both for $30,000 a year each, room and board included, but you'll have to put up with an expanded chicken operation. If I can arrange to sell fresh eggs to the diner in town, we have no problem. What do you say? You got a deal, Nora said. We've both lived on ranches all our lives and know how to keep things running. Great. Let me give you the grand tour. We took them around the home first, showing them the 6 bedrooms. Take your pick. It's not like we're short on space here. We then walked to the machine shed, which housed the ranch's most significant investment, apart from the property itself. I kept everything tidy and well-lit. I'd gotten into the habit of putting a pressure washer on the tractor and attachments on occasion, and it didn't take long to run over everything with a little car wax during the autumn season. It reduced corrosion and made it easier to remove dirt and muck. I had the cultivator connected to the tractor and the front-end loader still attached. Hell, I never took the bucket off since it was used virtually daily. I didn't give them a close-up tour of the cattle operation since they didn't have boots on, but I did show them the garden and point out what was growing there. We concluded at the chicken run and granary, which is linked to the hen house. So what do you think? I inquired. They exchanged glances before Sandra, the blonde, remarked, We're in. It's well kept up, so you're not lazy or a slob. I'm just curious why you don't have cats and dogs. I shrugged. Never seemed to see the need. I've got the granary lined and galvanized, so rats would starve to death. Dogs, if you're willing to help take care of them, they'll say okay. They make good burglar alarms if nothing else. We returned to the table, and I brought out some documents. We signed everything, and I accompanied them into town, where I gave them both debit cards for the farm expenditure account and a pair of inexpensive mobile phones. The account had $60,000, so they should not empty it anytime soon. At the hardware shop, I had a pair of keys made for both the gate and the home, and I handed one to each. There, now you're on the payroll and have access. They'll show you the keyboard where the tractor keys and such are stored. They'll give you 2 to 5 days to move in and get up to speed. You'll have to inventory the larder and figure out what you want to cook. Do you trade off cooking, or does one do it all? Nora likes to cook more than I do, but we trade off when we feel like it, Sandra said. Okay, I'm a bachelor cook from way back and can do a few things well. I've even worked short-order breakfasts, but that's been a while. I purchased 80 white leghorn pullets and 1 rooster. Then I increased my cracked grain orders for the birds. The restaurant said that they would be pleased to purchase fresh eggs, up to 12 dozen each day. They had recipes on file that would use them up. We agreed on a price that was around 4/5 the amount paid by their distributor. I informed them that I had just ordered the pullets, so there would be a wait until they began laying. That was wonderful for them because they needed to build up the demand. We began doing the waiting pool thing again. That many chickens certainly produced a lot of chicken. I needed to purchase wheat straw for nesting and to cover the floor of the henhouse. It wasn't very expensive, but I had to remember to do it. Sandra and Nora got right into it. They got up at 5 a.m., the same time I did. When I returned from walking the fence every morning, they had food on the table. We ate, spoke, and drank coffee before heading outside to perform our duties. I cared for the cattle while they handled the chicks. We normally ate sandwiches for lunch, and then I weeded the garden. After I dropped off the cultivator, I connected up a 2-wheeled cart covered with dishpans, and we proceeded around the garden, collecting what was ready. I glanced around, wondering what was missing. Flowers. Flowers and trees. I discussed it with the ladies. We determined where an orchard would look best. I dug up the ground in front of the machine shed to bury some more seep irrigation lines before sending out for 6-foot trees. They cost more than shorter ones, but they had a higher chance of surviving transplant shock. I planted peaches, pears, plums, apples, and oranges. I just planted a couple dozen trees of each kind. However, I did plant a variety of apples and plums. They entered at various times. It didn't take much to keep the orchards going, other than spreading chicken manure between them whenever I shoveled out the hen coop. The material was so powerful that I had to wet it in and then cover it with some mulch. We converted our meat output to red pole cattle. The market was better, and they performed well on grass. We applied a 1-month grain finish before mailing them. I was astounded at how much money we got per person. The ranch has turned around. It was profitable after all of the investments were paid off. The payrolls were being paid, the investment accounts were accumulating funds, and the neighbors had nothing but positive things to say about the ranch. I still had probably $500,000 in gray money and lowish jewels in the vault. After 6 years, I felt compelled to walk down to the bus station. A little child sat on the bench, looking grubby, tattered, and forlorn. He had a 1,000-yard gaze, something I hadn't seen in months. I sat on the same bench. "Say, kid, you look lost." He examined me like a dead fish. "Screw off. I'm no shark bait. Shut up and listen to me. Over 35 years ago, an old woman gave me a break. I was 9, and I had just had my family killed in front of me. She took a risk and took me in. I'm here to pay back a debt now. Stick your tool in your pocket and tell me you need a place to stay." It took a long time to respond. He gazed down to the ground. "Yeah, ever worked on a farm?" He shrugged his shoulders. "Yeah, sure, work around horses, some garden work. Well, it'll keep you fed, a roof over your head, clothes and boots on you, and a little cash in your pocket. If you honestly throw in on the chores, and maybe take over riding the tractor every day to cultivate the garden." He grinned. Okay, I knew that wasn't the start of a lovely friendship. Far from it. But I wondered whether Lois was watching from someplace. She taught me a few qualities that I wished to instill in the child: trust and respect. You could go a long way with them. I know I did. Thanks for watching. What would you have done in their place? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe.